You know Monopoly, right? Of course you do. The little top hat, the race car, the inevitable family arguments over who gets boardwalk. But the story of where that game came from, the one they printed inside the box for decades, well, that's where things get really interesting. So, the official story we were all told is a real classic. It's 1935, the middle of the Great Depression. This guy, Charles Darrow, he's unemployed, down on his luck. And to cheer up his family, he supposedly invents a game on an old oilcloth in his basement, a game about buying up property in Atlantic City. He takes it to Parker Brothers, sells it, and boom, becomes a millionaire. It's the perfect American rags to riches tale. Except that's not what happened. Not even close. That whole heartwarming story that sold millions and millions of games, it was a complete myth. And the real story, well, it's so much better. It's a story of protest, a forgotten female inventor, and a wild legal battle that blew the lid off the whole thing. And that fight doesn't start in the 1930s. Nope. We have to jump forward 40 years, to a time when an economics professor decided he was going to take on a corporate giant. So meet Ralph Anspach. In the 1970s, he finds himself in this decade-long war with Parker Brothers, the massive company behind Monopoly. I mean, this was a true David and Goliath situation. So what got him so fired up? Well, Anspach was really ticked off by the OPEC oil crisis. He saw how monopolies could really mess things up for regular people. So he did what any economics professor would do. He designed a board game about it. He called it Anti-Monopoly. And the whole point of his game wasn't to build a monopoly, it was to bust them up. The literal opposite of the game we all know. And as you can imagine, Parker Brothers was not a fan. They sued him for trademark infringement and told him he had to destroy every single copy of his game. I mean, for Anspach, everything was on the line. To win this case, Anspach knew he couldn't just defend his own little game. He had to go bigger. He had to completely tear down the foundation of Parker Brothers' entire claim, the official Monopoly creation story. And this is the story that Parker Brothers brought to court, the Darrow myth. For them, it was everything. It was their marketing gold, their legal shield, their company lore. Anspach's only chance was to prove that this beloved story was a total work of fiction. Okay, so if the story about the down-on-his-luck salesman wasn't true, then what was? Who really invented Monopoly? Anspach had to become a detective, digging through history to find the truth, because he knew his entire case, his whole future, depended on that answer. And what he found was just incredible. He unearthed this forgotten inventor and a game with an original purpose so radical, it's no wonder it was buried and erased from history. Get this, the game we know as Monopoly wasn't invented in 1935. It was patented as the landlord's game all the way back in 1904. That is a 31-year gap between the real invention and the corporate fairy tale. And the inventor? A woman named Lizzie Magie. So who was Lizzie Magie? Well, she was about as far from the Charles Darrow character as you could possibly get. She was a writer, a proud feminist, and a really outspoken anti-monopolist. She was an intellectual on a political mission. And she was a proven innovator. Long before her game, she actually held a patent for a device that made typewriters work better. I mean, this was a serious, recognized inventor in an era when women received less than 1% of all patents. She was a big deal. Okay, but this is the most mind-blowing part of the whole story. Mickey designed the landlord's game not to celebrate getting rich, but to warn people about it. It actually had two sets of rules. One version was designed so everyone could prosper, and the second, monopolist version, was designed to show exactly how landlords and big corporations crush everyone else. It was a teaching tool to show the evils of monopoly. So, how on earth did a protest game created by a feminist in 1904 to critique capitalism end up in the hands of Charles Darrow in 1935 with its meaning completely flipped on its head? Well, it spread like a folk song. Maggot's game wasn't a huge commercial success, but it got passed around by word of mouth. College students, intellectuals, progressive groups, they all played it. Eventually, a community of Quakers in Atlantic City added their own local street names to the board, names you definitely recognize. And one of the people that taught this homemade version to? A guy named Charles Darrow. And here is the tiny piece of evidence that proves this whole folk history. It's the smoking gun. A friend of Darrow's was copying the board by hand, and he made a mistake. He misspelled Marvin Gardens, which is a real place, as Marvin Gardens. And that little typo, that human error from a handmade copy, It's still on every single Monopoly board sold today. So, armed with all of this, Lizzie Magie's patent, the story of the Quakers, and that crucial typo, Ralph Anspach walked back into the courtroom. He just laid it all out. He proved, without a doubt, that the game of Monopoly, in one form or another, had been played and shared and changed for 30 years. It belonged to the public long, long before Charles Darrow ever laid eyes on it. And he won. The court's decision was an absolute bombshell. The U.S. Court of Appeals stated in no uncertain terms that calling Darrow the inventor was, and I quote, clearly erroneous. The myth was officially, legally dead. Just think about the incredible irony here for a second. A game invented by a woman to warn people about the dangers of monopolies had its own history monopolized by a giant corporation which completely erased its female creator in the process. You just can't make this stuff up. So the next time you pass Go, maybe remember the two people who really made that game. Lizzie Magie, who invented it as a warning, and Ralph Anspach, the professor who fought for a decade just to make sure we could all know her name. And it kind of leaves you with a much bigger question, doesn't it? The true story of Monopoly was hidden right there in plain sight for over half a century. It really makes you wonder, how many other histories, the ones we think we know so well, have been quietly rewritten to tell a completely different story?